There's an underdog mentality, and there's a chip on our shoulder, and that's who I am. Like, that's who I've been since I was in high school, and I was a short, lefty quarterback trying to make a name for myself, and then, walking on and switching positions, and then, coming up through the coaching ranks, and, not having had, a father or anything that was in coaching. Like, I have that underdog mentality, and Vandy here, like, every week is a battle. Every season's a battle. The margins are thin, but it's such an exciting, challenge to be able to coach guys that are all about that and have that same mentality.
Welcome to Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. Each episode pulls back the curtain on the coaching profession, spotlighting voices from every level of the game and offering lessons and insights for your own path. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Follow Inside the Headset on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. We drop new episodes each week, so hit that follow button and never miss a moment. Now, let's get inside the headset.
Coach, what's happening, man? How we doing?
How's it going, Mario? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for carving out some time for us, man. I'm excited about just going through your playing career all the way to where you are now in the profession. And so we always start the podcast off with, when did you know you want to be part of this great game from a coaching standpoint, and when was that for you? Yeah,
so I think it probably starts early on when I was younger. I had an older sister who's great, and and she coached me up through a lot of things, but I also had 2 younger brothers, and just being able to be a part of their athletic journeys and being able to, coach them in baseball, basketball, football, trying to help them be better than I was, really. I mean, ultimately, that's what it was about, was I wanted them to reach a level of success, even at the young age that I didn't have. And I loved, just throwing batting practice to them in the backyard, finding out ways to get them, a little bit better, football-wise, giving them advice and all that stuff. And so I think from, an early age then, it was, watching them succeed. And, that brought a lot of joy to me and, a lot of joy to my family. And I think that was when it was like, hey, if I could do this for a living, that would be awesome. And then, fast forward into my career at Notre Dame, just being an older guy who didn't play a lot. I played a little bit on special teams, but, I felt as a veteran, kind of my role was to help the younger guys. If I could be as much of a coach to them, a mentor to them as an older player, and help them succeed and flourish in the program, help them understand the defense, help them understand, how to get better at their technique and hone their craft. That kind of became my role as I became a veteran. And, that was something that I was like, hey, I had some business interviews and stuff like that going to the corporate world my senior year, but it was like, hey, ultimately I couldn't see myself doing anything but something like this.
Absolutely, man. Now, you had a unique playing career. We see some unique combos in regards to maybe a running back switching over to defense and playing linebacker, or a corner switching over and playing wide receiver. But you had probably one of the most unique ones I've ever seen. You played quarterback and not only did that, but you backed up a legend and then went over to the other side of the ball and played defensive back. So just probably pretty unique, and probably the stuff that you were able to learn as a player that helped you quickly, I guess, mesh into the profession. But how was that experience, being able to be at a program like Notre Dame and play on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, it was an awesome experience. Not only being in it, but then, looking back, how much it did help, my coaching career, especially early on, because, learning how to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and being able to adapt. And really at that point, when I came in, and walked on as a freshman at Notre Dame, it was, I had played quarterback in high school. So that was what I was so used to. And, so they had a need there. All the quarterbacks had transferred. Jimmy Clausen was the starter. He was going to be the starter for the next 3 years. And, so they were looking for somebody to, a spring camp arm that could help bail them out. And, fortunately for me, I was there for them to help with that. And, so backing up Jimmy Clausen, my first spring practice, I was like, dang, I got no business being his backup. But it was a good experience. Learning offensively at the time. Coach Weiss was the head coach. So, his playbook, the New England Patriots playbook, the one that had won Super Bowls and all that, having to dive into that and having a really having to dive into the details of being a quarterback at the highest level. And, so that was pretty cool. And then, they brought in reinforcements eventually, 5'8", 5'9", lefty quarterback. They didn't see a need for that anymore. So, being a walk-on, it was like, hey, where can you fill a need for the team? And, there's a need at defensive back. So ended up transitioning to defensive back my junior, senior, and fifth year. And then that also helped get on the special teams because that was my role. I played a little bit on special teams, didn't play on offense and defense at all, but playing defense and transition to that definitely helped get on special teams. And, the thing about quarterback is you have to have an awareness of what everybody's doing on the field. Yeah. Not only what you are doing, I even say it now with our linebackers, it's like me, us, and them. If you know what me's doing, I know what I'm doing first, then it's us as a group, and then it's them. What's the other team trying to do? And at quarterback, you have to know all three of those things from the jump. So, so that definitely gave me a taste of that. And then, having to switch over to defense was, defensive back, given a higher level knowledge of, the overall scheme was really good. But I think more than anything, it was like, hey, it prepared you to be uncomfortable, to have to adapt and have to learn quickly and realize that, hey, you might not be the best equipped from a talent standpoint, but how can you maximize that talent? How can you get the most out of yourself and maximize? And I think that's what, helped kind of carry over in coaching.
Absolutely. Now, at some point in time, your eligibility runs out and you want to be a part of the profession. So kind of what were those steps immediately following that ultimately led to you getting the job at Holy Cross?
Yeah, like I said, I initially, for a second there was like, maybe the coaching thing is, maybe I'd rather take the easier route, go into, marketing or business or whatever and, get a nice, cushy corporate job. But ultimately, I knew in my heart that this is what I wanted to do. So, after I knew I wanted to come back for a fifth year, got asked to come back for a fifth year. And I knew that I wanted to make it known to the coaching staff, what my goals were. So my current coaches, hey, I want to be a coach someday. If you hear anything, any openings come up, please let me know. And those guys were really helpful. And, a lot of those guys, now looking back, such a great staff, our head coaches right now and, at the FBS level, we're coaching the NFL. And, so those guys were really helpful in identifying, hey, I got to know a friend at this school. I know a friend at this school, somewhere where I could start out at. I initially got a job through one of my coaching contacts, Chuck Martin, who was at Miami of Ohio. He was my position coach at Notre Dame. So, and he knew a guy at the Division III level who got me a job, and I applied for a GA job there. I was actually there for a spring before my job at Holy Cross. Wow. I actually I couldn't get my transcript cleared from Notre Dame because I still had student debt and student loan to pay off. So I couldn't get my transcript cleared to get into grad school. So I ended up, having to switch over and Holy Cross. I was just an intern at the time, so I didn't have to release my transcript yet. I still had some student loans to pay off, but I ended up at Holy Cross because of another, connection at Notre Dame. Yeah. They had a job that opened, and director of player personnel, his name's Tim McDonald. He's actually one of the Giants executives right now for the New York Giants. He played at Holy Cross, and he knew the head coach, and they had an opening. And next thing you know, I'm in Worcester, Massachusetts. Taking my first job as a restricted earnings, defensive back job. So the connections from playing definitely led to some connections in coaching and led to my first opportunity.
Well, that's kind of a unique story that I think, that can happen to anybody where you're in that position where you got to all the stuff to be a GA. Like you said, send the transcripts over, take the GRE or, whatever type of test that you got to take. And you easily could be in the shoes of maybe I don't pass, maybe I don't get a qualifying score on my GRE, maybe I got some loans locked up or whatever.
Right.
How was that not discouraging for like, did you not look at that and say, man, you know what, maybe I need to call that market in place back and see if you still got the job?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I think a little bit of it is like, you got to find the way, find the way. But there's so many options in coaching, now that you bring that up, like it may not always be concrete. It may not always be going GA at, at Alabama right away or, GA at Georgia right away. Like the journeys are all different. And, but there's going to be somewhere, somewhere that you can get in, whether it's, as a volunteer, whether it's a restricted earnings, whether it's part-time, like, having coached at the FCS level, there are a lot of guys that coach part-time or volunteered. And, so I was fortunate that the opportunities were a little bit limited because I couldn't get my transcript, released at that time. But also there were enough opportunities where it was like, hey, you got to fit in where you can get in and take advantage of just getting your foot in the door.
Right. Now, another thing I do want to ask before we kind of start really getting into your career here is, I get a lot of calls, and if you listen to podcasts repetitively, I do apologize because I've told the story before, but I get a lot of calls and guys hit me up and say, hey, look, I want to get in a profession. I want to coach college. And the first thing I do is say, hey, go reach out to your staff. Go let every last guy that you play for, oh, cool, you played at 2 schools or, this, that, or the other. Oh, your guys got fired halfway through that. You got a bigger network.
Yeah.
And go encourage those guys to hit people up. But, I learned that through trial and error myself. How did you have kind of that foresight your senior year to go and walk into some of those offices and say, hey, look, just so you know, this is what I want to do. Give you a heads up now.
Yeah, I think I got some advice from somebody that was a former coach at Notre Dame that then had transitioned to athletic administration. He had retired from coaching, and he said that. He said, hey, man, don't make it, don't hide it that you want to coach. Like, let everybody know. And it was a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning because, as a walk-on defensive back, you don't really, know the offensive line coach very well, or the tight ends coach very well. But to go in and say, hey, this is what I want to do. And it's funny because those guys, a couple of those guys that I thought, nothing would come of it. Those were the ones that in the future actually ended up helping me out or hey, making a call for me or understand. It's just, I think guys really, they appreciate guys that want to get into coaching. And I think they appreciate, talking about their backgrounds and being able to give any nuggets of wisdom that they, that they have. And it also is like, hey, you want to kind of pay it forward. And I think those guys did that for me in terms of helping me out with opportunities. And I think that most coaches are willing and able, to do the same for young coaches. But like you said, I mean, you just don't be afraid about reaching out. Even if it's a guy that maybe you didn't necessarily have a close relationship with, but you never know who might, have an opportunity that you fit at the time. And, so stuff and relationships obviously can build, in the future. You might have a different dynamic in the beginning, but then, in your next life, you end up having a great relationship with somebody. So definitely don't be shy, make it known that that's what you want to do and be bold about, what you want for your future.
No doubt. I think that's some absolutely great advice. And I remember one of the things I struggled with when I identified I wanted to coach in college, I was like, I would hold the phone in my hand and be like, man, I remember he yelled at me so hard for bouncing out inside zone to the outside. Like, he doesn't want to hear from me. And those guys, regardless of our relationship in college, like, I mean, they were so excited to hear from me. They're so excited to this day when I bump into them at the convention. And I just think you can be surprised, when you look at things like that and, not necessarily count somebody out because you didn't build necessarily a relationship with them through that player-coach dynamic. Now, let's talk about Holy Cross. So you accept the intern position. And I think one of the probably I don't know, I guess over the last decade, it's been crazier than ever because, minus a GA and a full-time position, those have been really the only 2 roles that have kind of been pretty much the same, but you know, an analyst at one school can mean a totally different thing than
Right.
have different responsibilities. So the intern thing can always be, you can have your own position group, or you might not, you know, do anything but break down film. What was your intern experience like at Holy Cross in 2012 and 13?
Yeah, so it was a lot, but I'm thankful for it because that kind of, basically there was one, you know, restricted earnings guy on either side of the ball. So I was, you know, wearing a bunch of different hats. GA role, obviously, data breakdown, tendencies, scouting reports, you know, academic checks, making smoothies in the weight room, you know, some equipment responsibilities. So, and then, you know, on top of that, it was like, okay, you know, you also are going to coach, you know, a position. So I was fortunate to work with, you know, our head coach, Tom Gilmore, who was great, very knowledgeable, smart dude, took me under his wing. And then our defensive coordinator, Andy Rondo, was the DC, but he was also the secondary coach. So I was his, you know, assistant, obviously. And, you know, he gave me responsibility with the younger guys, especially because I had just gotten done, you know, playing corner and safety.
Yeah.
He you know, it definitely empowered me to be able to coach those guys. And, you know, that first year helped out with the corners a bunch, which was cool. You know, obviously at that time, though, I learned that, you know, the big function of your role is you need to be the best you can for the defensive coordinator. You know, you got to help with the technology, with the computer, with, you know, with the PowerPoints, with the scouting reports, the cut-ups, all that stuff. And, you know, it's kind of, it was frustrating at times, but it was also like, hey, you got to find a way and figure it out and get it done. And also Coach Rondo was great in that regard from a technology standpoint. So he kind of challenged me to, hey, what's your edge? You know, what's your edge? Everybody wants to coach, but what is your edge? His edge was, you know, he was great with technology. You know, he was a student assistant way back at Syracuse, and you know, it's like, hey, what are you going to carve out as your calling card? You know, as a coach. So that kind of challenged me in ways there. And then my second year at Holy Cross, you know, obviously understood the defense a little bit better. So I took on a little bit bigger role with the safeties. So that was cool being able to coach, you know, corners and then safeties my second year. And then obviously still doing a lot of GA work and, you know, some of the grunt work. But, you know, as I've told kind of the GAs and analysts here, that stuff in a lot of ways helps you become a much better coach because you have to draw the cards. You know, not only is it building the work ethic, but you're understanding from a top, you know, bottom up, you know, standpoint, how an organization's run. You know, you're more ready and a lot of times to be a coordinator after having been a GA for the coordinator, rather than a position coach because you know all that has to go into the organization of building a unit and all that stuff.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I want to ask you, like obviously you're having an outstanding career to be coaching in the SEC. You're a young guy, you know, man, sky's the limit for you. Right. And I think a lot of people look at probably that and say, man, this is what I want, man. It you know, everything was candy and roses along the way. But when you're doing that intern and like you started that list, and I bet you could have kept going in terms of all the responsibilities that you had. You know, at what point in time, especially as you just got done playing football and it was fun and it was enjoyable and you got to sleep in as long as you wanted on every night and woke up whenever you wanted, you know, and what did you have any of those moments where you like, man, this is overwhelming. I'm drinking out of a fire hose. And then also with that answer, what was your niche? You know, he challenged you, your DC challenged you. What was that thing that you kind of carved out? Yeah.
Well, you know, to answer your first question, for sure, there's a lot of times where it was like, hey, you know, could pack it up and maybe, you know, utilize the network and, you know, the school and all that stuff. I think I had a pretty good idea of what the coaching profession, especially early on, was like.
Yeah.
Just from my own experience, you know, as a player at Notre Dame, you know, I was 2 years with Coach Weiss's staff, and then there was a change, and 2 years with Coach Kelly's staff. So I saw kind of the toll that it took on the staff and, you know, and their families. And so I kind of went in eyes wide open. I remember telling, you know, my wife, who was, you know, my girlfriend at the time, you know, our senior year, hey, I think I want to coach. And, you know, the first 10 years, you know, if you want to be, you know, with me, I want to make sure that I warn you about this, and what it might be. And, the first 10 years, you might be making more money than me. We might have to move 6 or 7 times. There's going to be wins, there's going to be losses. And she swears she agreed, that she agreed with it, and, right. And I swear that I did have that conversation with her, although, 10 years later, she's like, I don't remember having that conversation. Right. But sure enough, to answer your question, all that stuff really came true. That first 10 years, I was a GA and an analyst. I was my only, technically full-time position job was at Lafayette in 2017 as a linebackers coach. And, and that felt a lot like a GA analyst role as well. So, so kind of what I looked at, the beginning of the profession, it was, hey, if coaching, if this career is going to be a marathon, I want to fuel up as much as I can in the beginning. Yeah. And I want to make sure that I'm hydrated, that I'm properly fueled, that I'm properly trained. And so when I do get the opportunity that I really want, I'll be ready to kick butt with it and not just to survive, not be figuring out on the fly. And, there were a lot of times where, 29 years old and, 2 kids and, a GA. And it's like, dang, I don't know. I don't know how much further we can take this thing. But fortunately, my wife has been, so supportive on the journey and, through the ups and downs and the adversity. My family as well, they've been so supportive. And also I've had, a lot of really good, mentors and people that I've worked with that have encouraged me in those times, whether it's a word of encouragement, hey, you're doing a really good job, or, whether it's a player, because at the end of the day, like, how can we help serve the players, and when I stopped worrying about, hey, what's the next promotion? What does this head coach think of me? Am I going to get taken to this job? Like, when I stopped worrying about that and I just started worrying about, hey, help the players become better people and help them become better players. When I started focusing on those two things, I became a much better coach, and it also became, a lot more fulfilling. So, so I think those are signals for sure, especially when you get them from players, that it's like, hey, I think I want to continue to do this because that's what it's about in the first place.
Yeah, amen. I love that you kind of identified, you kind of finding your why in this deal, and kind of when that page turned a little bit in your career, because, and everybody's why might be different. Hopefully it's definitely a part of it is to serve these young people. But, some people want to make as much money as possible or wear the biggest, coolest looking logo that you can possibly get on your shirt. Or some people want to impact young people, and that's the goal. But whatever it is, it's kind of like when you find it, the light bulb really does come on, and it's kind of a big, kind of shift in how you approach everything. Now, after those 2 years there at Holy Cross, I guess I had the second part because I am curious. What ended up being your niche there? What was the thing that you found?
So I think it ended up being, I think player relationships, and I think having energy, like consistent energy, and I think that's something, hopefully that people would say, is that there's consistent energy. And there's a focus on the players and the relationships. And I think too, it's like always putting yourself, the further away you get from playing, the easier it is to kind of forget about what the day-to-day grind is for the student athletes. And it's easy for, the coaches to say, it was just a summer workout, or, that workout wasn't that hard. It's like, well, hey man, like those guys are grinding, in 90-degree heat, and, and they're busting their butts, and like, we ask our players to do hard things. So like, I think we need to do hard things. So like, I've constantly tried to stay in that mode of like, hey, what is it like as a player? And, in a way, try to stay, young and relatable in that way, because those are the guys that are going through the grind all the time. So it's like, how can you have, consistent energy, that the players can feed off of? And how can you kind of keep that mindset of like, hey, walk in the player's shoes? And that could be anywhere from, like I said, understanding what their day or their week was like. It's finals week. It's a grind. They just came off back-to-back early morning lifts, all the way to like, hey, in this defense, are you asking them to serve 2 masters? Are you asking them to do something that's really, really hard that they're not going to be able to do at a high level? But just constantly putting yourself in those shoes, I think, is important, especially as you further and further away you get from actually playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you met that challenge head on, kind of start finding yourself as a coach a little bit, as we mentioned, kind of finding that thing that sparked you. And after 2 seasons there at Holy Cross, you get the opportunity to go GA at UConn. So out of curiosity, what led to that? And then, how did you get over the hurdle, I guess, to be back to GA, have the ability to GA, I guess is the question.
Yeah. So, well, I had to take out a few more student loans, so that was good.
Yeah.
Which I tell people now, and I tell the players, because, obviously it's great, with NIL and, but scholarships alone are awesome. And I tell some of our players sometimes, man, I didn't get done paying my student loans until like 2 years ago, so it's like, and you guys are so fortunate, to not only to have scholarships at great academic institutions, but also the NIL on top of it. But I tell guys just, jokingly about that, but was able to do that. And then, the defensive coordinator when I was at Notre Dame, his name is Bob Diaco. So he got the head coaching job at UConn, and we formed a great relationship at Notre Dame. And when he got the job at UConn, he asked me to come with him to be a graduate assistant. And just what he formed at Notre Dame on the defensive side of the ball was special. They ended up going to the national championship. 1 year they had the top defense in the country. But I kind of knew his culture and loved and appreciated that. And so he asked me to come to UConn and help him out. Actually, it was on the offensive side of the ball, though, which again was another, kind of change of scenery, getting back to offense. But a great experience because, was able to first of all, we were taking over a program that needed to be rebuilt, needed to have a new identity and a new culture. But then also for me personally, coaching receivers and special teams, for the first time, learning from a guy named Wayne Linebackers, who's been a, great coach in the profession for a while, helping him out with receivers and special teams was yet another, learning experience. And then the following year, coach running back and, our offensive coordinator, Frank Verducci, another, great coach, experienced guy who's coached at every level. He, was kind of an offensive line tight end guy by trade. So he was like, hey, I want you to kind of take over the running back. So I was like, I got no idea how to coach running back. Like, last time I played running back was in 3rd grade in Pop Warner. So,
right.
But again, it was a great opportunity and to kind of carve my own, way that I coached the position, learning from other guys. How did they coach it? Kind of from my own perspective. Hey, if I was a running back and I was starting from scratch, what would I want to know? So that was another great challenge there. And then flip back, to the defensive side of the ball my 3rd year at UConn to work with Coach Diaco and work with the linebackers, work with Coach Anthony Poindexter, who's awesome in this profession and, has had a great career. And just learning from all those guys is just such a great experience. So my first 6 years coaching 6 different positions, all 3 sides of the ball, definitely didn't get comfortable at any point, but it was a blessing, being able to learn that stuff.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier in this thing you wanted to just be that sponge. You wanted to learn, you wanted to equip yourself and hydrate and all those type of things. I mean, there's nothing more, challenging to just hop around positions that early on where you really, some of those positions, like you said, running back, it probably didn't know anything, so probably learn how to learn. From a coach's standpoint. But I wanted to ask, I think sometimes when you're having some transitions early, one of the things that can be difficult is walking into a coach's office and looking them in the eyes and say, hey, look, I got another opportunity or I'm exploring another opportunity. How did you handle that conversation with the Holy Cross head coach?
Yeah, well, he was great because, I'd been there for 2 years and I think he appreciated the work that I did there. And I think in a lot of ways he knew both from a financial standpoint and, from a level standpoint, that it was probably better for me. I was married at the time and and had our first child. So, making $3,000 and living across the street in the student housing wasn't necessarily, ideal from a family standpoint. So I think that he knew, and I think it's just honesty, and I think some guys handle that better than others. Fortunately, in my career, most of the guys that I've had those conversations with handle it great, as long as you're honest with the process. And and for sure, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. One, the easy one is the easy detachment, and they say, hey, congratulations, and, wish you the best and all that. And I think you make sure that you show an appreciation, not just then, but you check in with and keep, those relationships fresh, checking in on their families and checking in on how things are going. But the difficult way is when they don't want you to go, but in some ways though, you have to take that as a compliment, because it means that, they know that you leaving is going to leave a hole in the organization. So even though at the time, some guys take that emotionally and, maybe don't handle the news as well. I think as long as you're honest and, you handle it in the best way possible, then you can be confident, moving forward in that.
Now, while you were at UConn, you kind of mentioned bouncing around 3 different positions. I'd be curious, what does that conversation look like in regards to at the end of each year where you do make that transition? Is the head ball coach is poking his head in your office and saying, hey, by the way, you're coaching running backs, or hey, welcome back to defense, or how were those conversations going for you?
Yeah, it's so obviously, as you know, it's so fluid, and there's staff changes that go on, and because of that, the dominoes fall, with the younger guys, and it's a little bit like like I told you about with my playing career, as a walk-on, it's like the team has a need, you got to fill the need, even if it's not what you ideally, had in mind or envisioned for yourself. Well, it's the same thing on a coaching staff, and obviously football is the ultimate team game, but same way when it comes to your role, in the program. So, we had some staff dominoes, and each year, that kind of led to some, changes in the GA's roles. But again, I think early on it was cool because I hadn't yet settled into one position, and I think at that point it was like, hey, let me, like I said before, try to fuel up for the marathon and get as much as I can in my arsenal as possible. Not only because I wanted to help the program, the current program, but also, hey, it could make me more marketable for other jobs, the next year. I ended up, after coaching receivers, ended up getting an offer from an FCS school to coach receivers. I didn't ultimately take it, but I never would have had that opportunity if not for, if not for that job there. But, ended up going into the third year, letting Coach Diaco know, I'd love to be able to work, for you on the defensive side of the ball and, and to learn from you. And he was all for that and, wanted me a part of that, and was so grateful for that year to be able to, learn linebacker play for the first time, really. And obviously from there, I've kind of, gotten settled into that position.
Well, that's awesome that you got all those experiences and been able to, like you said, coach 6 positions in 6 years, and plus your playing experience, because ultimately, you kind of settled into being the linebackers coach. I know you probably don't look at it like that you can coach anything, but man, I mean, the game. You understand receiver play, you understand quarterback play. I mean, through running backs, coaching running backs, you understand offensive line play to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So it's just such an awesome advantage to kind of be able to have early on. After those 3 years, you get your first full-time opportunity. You were talking about a little bit earlier at Lafayette. I would be curious of, was there an interview process to get this job? Did you have to go sit down and do an interview?
Yeah, there was. Coach John Garrett had just taken over at Lafayette at the time, and he was looking for guys to fill those roles, and he ended up hiring a guy named Luke Thompson, who was the defensive coordinator. Luke's now with the Jaguars, and he's the assistant special teams coordinator there. But Luke, had been a linebacker guy in a DC, so I knew I was gonna, have to understand his style of coaching, the way he wanted those guys coached. So I ended up, interviewing with Coach Garrett and Coach Thompson. The first time was at the AFCA convention. That was back in 2017. So met up for lunch and was in a hotel room for a little while. It ended up, there was a lot of staffing stuff that needed to go on. Coach Garrett was getting pulled in a bunch of different directions. So I didn't end up actually doing a formal sit-down long interview.
Yeah.
At that time, it was kind of just meeting the people. And then there was a follow-up where I drove, I remember driving from University of Connecticut and Stores down to Easton, PA through a snowstorm, 4 or 5 hours. And he wanted me to come on one of their official visit weekends at Lafayette, their first one actually. and kind of interview there. And even there, everybody's kind of running around. So it wasn't necessarily a knockdown, drag out, 4-hour football interview. It was kind of just a personality type interview and a little bit with Coach Thompson. But that ended up working out. And I had some previous connections with Coach Garrett also. And that year at Lafayette was awesome because we had a great staff, a lot of young guys. Coach Garrett, awesome, his passion for football and for young people. And then, Coach Thompson was great to work for and, a different style than what I've been used to, but he's been so successful every, place that he's been. Obviously now he's in the NFL. So, and, has become a great friend. So that was just another great experience. Again, it's FCS, so you're wearing a bunch of different hats and, I was the smoothie coach there that had to make the, smoothies after the lift. And, we were kind of, scrimping for summer meals for our guys and had to go to the farmer's market and get vegetables and all that stuff. But, that made it fun and it made it, the wins and, some of the tough times, easier to deal with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now you also had some, I'm sure you had tons of personal success at all these stops, but, coach at FCS All-American and Brandon Bryan and at that point in time. And, sometimes when you're able to experience those players' success to that capacity where, the notoriety kind of shows up on a sheet of paper, obviously you've been off the field. So I'm sure you've been around the vicinity of that, but hey, that's your guy, man. Yeah. That he sat in your room, he's under your tutelage. How was that? Yeah, not necessarily just that experience, but just been able to have some success and see your guy do it, for the first time that year.
Yeah, and it's definitely cool, to be able to kind of have your own room, so to speak.
Yeah.
Coach Thompson also was great because he didn't micromanage, and he let, even though we have different styles, like he kind of let my style happen when we needed his style, to interject. That interjected, but I learned so much from him. And the players, like Brandon was a great player, before I got there. So, it's kind of just helping him get over the edge with a couple things that, kind of led from him being a really good player to being a great player. But in a lot of ways, those guys and having coached at Holy Cross, at Lafayette, at UConn, Notre Dame, Vandy, there's a common theme there. Like these are smart dudes. Like they are really smart, on and off the field. And in a lot of ways, those guys make the coaches better, because they challenge us, they force us to know not just the what, but the why. And I think, even in some cases, like when I got to Lafayette or when I got to Notre Dame, like those veteran guys, they knew more about the defense than I did, so it was about finding a way to just help them with a piece of their game, maybe, that they needed to elevate to the next level. Yeah. It might not be everything, but it might be one thing. It might be, hey, pass coverage and cover 4, or a blitz technique or something. If you can be a tool, in their toolbox or a weapon for them on the field, just to elevate their game a little bit, I think that's when, seeing their personal success is really gratifying because you get to see kind of them take the next step and hopefully you help them with that.
Amen. Amen. Well, after that 1 year, you get the opportunity to kind of go back to your alma mater, which I can only imagine how awesome that is. Not just because it's Notre Dame, but like I said, because you played there before, and work as a graduate assistant. So once again, what role did you take on that? How did that come about? And obviously during that time, I don't know if you met Clark Lea. You have to talk about that relationship at that point. Yeah. I don't know if you already knew him, but played in the CFP. 2018 and 2020, 2019 bowl appearance. Just a phenomenal time for you to enjoy in a profession. So start with, I guess, how did you end up getting that gig?
Yeah, so I got a call from Coach Lee, in end of January. That would have been January 2018. I kind of was just getting settled into my role at Lafayette, excited to go into my second year as linebackers coach. And my wife and I, because we had been a GA for 6 years, basically, those first 6 years, and then, get my head above the water, finally being the linebackers coach, she was like, no more GA jobs. You're not being a GA, Dad, we're not doing that. So, when Coach Lee called, it was, I had never met him. I'd never met Coach Lee. Had barely, heard of him prior to that. But, he had just gotten promoted to be the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Mike Elko had just left. And so Coach Lea assumed the coordinator role, and he was like, "Hey, I know where you're at." He was basically like, he was in my head already. Like, he's like, "I know that your head's above the water. You got a linebacker's job. I was in the same spot as you, 6 years ago. I took a GA job at UCLA after I was the linebackers coach at South Dakota State. And I did it because I knew that there was going to be more for me, on the back end of it. And sure enough, I was able to have the success that I have and, able to be where I'm at now." He's like, I think you can do the same, type of thing. And he's like, "I want you to come here, and I don't want you to just be my GA. I want you to be my GA, but I want to help train you, to become the linebackers coach, one day. And I want you to help build this with me. And I want us to, come up with the best ways to coach linebackers. And, we're going to be partners in this. And, we're going to have a lot of success." And, so obviously that was like, wow, he was already, the kind of some of the concerns that I had about stepping back and taking a GA role. He had already kind of addressed those and from his own personal experience. And then, and then obviously I did my research. I called a bunch of people that I knew at Notre Dame that were still there, asked about Coach Lea, asked, people at other places, as much info as I could get on him, just to say, hey, because I wasn't going to leave for just any GA job. Number one, it was back at Notre Dame, which was a plus. That was like where my wife and I met. That was like a second home to us. But two, I wasn't going to go back there just, to work for anybody. Because as you know, like so much of your life is shaped around who you work for.
Absolutely.
It's not just the place that you're at. It's the people. So all the people had great things to say about Coach Lea and said that he's, super smart, faith-filled guy, family guy, going to be a head coach one day. And, my wife and I prayed about it, for that few days, and Coach Lea gave me some space, to think about it. And, we got some signs and some confirmation from the Lord above and say, hey, this is going to be the best thing for us. And, so I ended up taking it, and it's been everything that everybody said about Coach Lea on the front end. It's been that and beyond that, in the, I guess, 7 years now, that I've known. So, obviously it ended up working out well, and we played a lot of good defense and won a lot of games at Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do want to ask, how did the initial start come from, for Coach Lea to call you? How did you get on his radar and all that good stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. So he actually, he was looking up Ivy League and Patriot League position coaches, linebacker coaches that were still in their GA window, still young enough to be in their GA window. And I fit that bill. I was just, at the end of my GA, term at the time where I was able to do that. So it was him just looking up, online, some names, and he came across my name, and it said that I graduated from Notre Dame, and he was like, well, dang, hopefully this will be a good fit. So he asked some people, Coach Kelly, who was still there, who I've played for the last year, asked some people, that were still there from when I played. And, fortunately I got the stamp of approval from them. And, he called me saying, hey, I think you'd be a good fit for this role. And, so it was again, semi-random, but it ended up, where hopefully the work that I did when I was, playing there, and some sort of, background that I had, helped kind of stamp that one. And, and Coach Lea jokes around with it now. He says that my interview was, that it was pretty low level, compared, and that I've come a long way from where I was 7 years ago, which looking back at some of the interview pamphlets that I had, I'm like, oh man, like, I don't know how I presented that or why I said that or whatever. It's a miracle that I got that job. But obviously, all those things that Coach Lea said as far as, teaching me, mentoring me, right. Helping me out up to this point.
Yeah. What I really love about, I guess, football in general, but definitely the coaching aspect of it is, like, man, some of the relationships you make can just be so life-altering, life-changing. I mean, in this random phone call, that you are just in this window just long enough to fit in. It turns into ultimately, you plan on one of the biggest stages you can play on in the SEC as a full-time coach. And it's just interesting that relationship kind of stemmed off this cold call from this guy that just happened to be an alum and has turned into a really good relationship and a really good opportunity for you, even up to this day. And so like I mentioned, had a ton of success there between 21 all the way between 18 all the way up to 21. I am curious, you already got your master's degree, right?
Yeah.
You got it from UConn.
Yep.
So maybe getting that degree is not that important. Did you end up getting it, or were you just kind of in a rush to get to that defensive analyst role that you ultimately get?
No, that really was more of, there's a kind of a non-degree seeking GA stuff at Notre Dame. So, so that was a little bit more so, hey, how can you serve the program as best you can, help win a national championship, maybe get into an analyst role, because they had analysts and senior analysts at the time. So it was kind of just how I can serve that, that role the best that I could, and obviously there was a class component with that as well. The main focus was, trying to do whatever I could to help with the football program. So.
Yeah. And I can only imagine, right? You've been a full-time coach before. You've done your GA time. I'm looking at 2018, right? You left Lafayette. You came. You had a heck of a year. Where it was in the college football playoffs. Like, were you not like, okay, cool, I'm about to get back into this thing and get my own room? Yeah. Was that not even around, or were you just kind of committed to sticking around?
Yeah. So I think this kind of goes back to I wanted to build that reservoir of knowledge and be around the best people possible to help, kind of fuel me up, for the long run. And there were opportunities, maybe a few more $1,000 here, a title upgrade, FCS, group of five, type positions. But for me, in my heart, I knew that being around the staff at Notre Dame and being around Coach Lea was going to end up helping me leaps and bounds more than, going out on, my own again and doing my own thing. And obviously, I think people approach their journeys in all different ways, but I think I know, in my heart, like I said, the first 10, 11 years of my career was largely GA and analyst roles. And like I said, there were opportunities along the way that came up that may have been a little bit more appealing from a resume standpoint or from a money standpoint. But truly, the people, matter that you're around. And I've been fortunate to be surrounded with so many good people that have poured into me. And I knew that at Notre Dame, I was going to get that. And what Coach Lea did such a great job of, as well as the other coaches on that staff. I mean, there's so many great coaches on that staff, but he did a great job of challenging me and empowering me to take on more and more of a role each year. So, whereas the first year it was, hey, get this GA stuff down, help it coach the younger guys, the freshmen and sophomores, that didn't really have a huge role in the defense. And as I was doing that, I was learning the defense myself, and I was learning how to coach and how to gain my coaching voice and my coaching style in that defense. And so then it was the second year was, hey, I'm a little bit, more prepared to take meetings on my own. Coach Lea, as a defensive coordinator, you got a lot of stuff that you're worried about, a lot of balls in the air that you're juggling. And so to be able to serve him and help take guys and meet with them separately or be able to run meetings while he was scripting was an awesome opportunity for me. I needed to get ready for that and train for that. And fortunately, that first year and a half, I had a great proving grounds to do that and great opportunities to do that. But him being able to say, hey, I'm going to empower you to do this. And I'm delegating some ownership here of this. You know what the standard is. Make sure that it's at that standard. And then you take it and run from there was awesome, because then in the second and third year, he allowed me to coach the linebackers and to take on, basically a position coach role still while doing, some of the GA and analyst stuff. But he was able to say, hey, I trust you enough so that I can leave the room. I can be out of town. I can be, do my DC stuff, and I can be able to trust that you're going to be able to take these guys and prepare them to play at a national championship level. So so that was awesome, and I appreciate, forever grateful to Coach Lee for that, because it helped kind of train me for what ended up doing my last year at Notre Dame, and then at Vanderbilt.
Right. Now, we did have Coach Lee on this podcast about a year ago, and I can't quite remember his timeline. When did he depart to go to Vandy?
Yeah, so after the 2020 season, we were in the college football playoff. We ended up playing Alabama in the Rose Bowl, lost to them. Coach Lee, back during the bowl season, had accepted the job for Vandy. So he was kind of double duty, both of those things, going into the bowl game. After the bowl game, then he was off to Vanderbilt. So then I stayed at Notre Dame for a year. So, I mean, and this is another thing too, like, there's going to be doors that open and doors that shut. And there are a lot of jobs that I was told no to, and a lot of jobs that I didn't get. And I kind of, as I look back and I kind of connect the dots, and, sometimes in prayer and reflection, you're like, man, this is why I didn't get that job. Man, this is why, this didn't happen, or this is why I needed to stay another year here or there. Like, number one, like, you're not entitled to anything. Right. I learned that, really throughout my time as a player, as a walk-on at Notre Dame. Like, you're never entitled to anything. Had to earn your spot, every semester. And then, in the coaching profession, you're not guaranteed anything. It doesn't matter if you're boys with the head coach, if you're brothers with the head coach. Like, it doesn't matter if you did a great job, if you deserve it, if you earn it. Like, you're not entitled. And I think what those couple of years taught me, in 2020 when Coach Lee left for Vandy, he assembled his staff, and I didn't fit into it at that time, but Coach Lee was always very forthright with me and said, hey, this is my first staff, not my last staff. I appreciate and I love you for all the work that you've done. And in the future, we will be in contact, And I knew Coach Lee, obviously it's frustrating at the time, but I knew Coach Lee was a great human being. And I knew that we had forged a relationship that went beyond just, hey, what a paycheck was, or what, a job was here and there, and then what that did was that opened up an opportunity in 2021 to work with Coach Freeman. So, Marcus Freeman came in to be the DC. I stayed at Notre Dame in my analyst role, and I wasn't Coach Freeman's guy. He didn't know me from Adam, but he gave me an opportunity to prove myself. And the next thing I know, I'm working, elbow to elbow with him, just like I was working with Coach Lee the past 3 years, and got to know Coach Freeman really well, and loved and appreciated working for him, and his work ethic and the way that he rolls up his sleeves, and the kind of players coach that he is, and that was a great experience. And I never would have gotten that experience had I gone to Vandy after that 2020 season. So it also was another year to be at Notre Dame and to coach the players that we had recruited there, and to see them through their 4 years. My youngest brother was a walk-on at Notre Dame, so I got to coach him when he was at Notre Dame, and that was such a special experience. We got to go to 2 college football playoffs together, and got to coach him when he was on the scout team, and so those things were really, really special. And and like I said, I got a chance to kind of have a new network, when Coach Freeman came in, and build a great relationship with him, which, ultimately we still have to this day, but never would have gotten that if not, for the chance to stay at Notre Dame in 2021.
Yeah. What's unbelievable kind of a piece of this deal is from Weiss to Kelly to Freeman. I didn't realize you played for about 15 years worth of Notre Dame head coaches, even though it's 3 guys, but I mean, that's pretty sweet to be able to kind of just be able to touch your program in that fashion. And I say your program as an alum, over that course of time. Now, I saw the little one running in there, man, and I know how valuable that time is. So I want to ask this though. So you have that special year, and right, like you said, man, you look back and reflect, and like this all happened for a reason. How did you reunite to end up back at Vandy?
Yeah, so after the 2021 season, there were a couple shakeups on Coach Lee's staff, And, I had the opportunity to come back to Notre Dame again. But Coach Lea called with an opportunity to be the linebackers coach. And, it was a great chance to reunite and a great chance. It was really hard to leave Notre Dame. And leaving Notre Dame was hard because, like I said, it's like a second home and, like my alma mater and everything. But people ask, was it hard to leave like the game days or the building or the stadium? Like, really what it came down to is the hardest thing to leave was the players. Like, because those dudes have become like brothers to me over the last, 4 years that I was there. I remember when I told them I was leaving, there were a lot of tears in the weight room, after a Friday workout in February. And, they probably thought we were, the softest set of linebackers and linebacker coaches in the country. There were a lot of tears, but what I wanted to do was, the same thing that, that we had at Notre Dame, that relationship. I wanted to try and duplicate that here at Vanderbilt, and even exceed it in a lot of ways. And so when, Coach Lea asked me, number one, Coach Lea, I had learned so much from him and value him so much, not only as a friend and, as a mentor, but also as a football coach. And he's challenged me in so many ways and I've learned so much, but I knew it was going to be a great opportunity for that. And then also, to be able to build that, on my own and build something that we did at Notre Dame with the linebackers and that close-knit group. I wanted to be able to do that at Vanderbilt. And then also it's like, SEC, it's Nashville, great place to raise a family. The challenge is awesome here. It's not easy to win here, but we have everything we need to compete and to win here. And also it's like, there's an underdog mentality, and there's a chip on our shoulder, and that's who I am. Like, that's who I've been since I was in high school and I was a short, lefty quarterback trying to make a name for myself, and then, walking on and switching positions, and then, coming up through the coaching ranks and, not having had, a father or anything that was in coaching. Like, I have that underdog mentality, and Vandy here, like every week is a battle, every season's a battle. The margins are thin, but it's such an exciting, challenge to be able to coach guys that are all about that and have that same mentality and to compete at the highest level. It's a battle every week. We play a tough schedule. You get to measure yourself though against the best. And that's what's awesome. As a coach, you get to measure yourself against the best because, you're taking your, whatever you have talent wise up against, the best of the best in the country. And I think that's an awesome challenge. And then, we strive to do more than just, survive here at Vandy. We're aiming for a championship. That's what we want to do. So to be a part of that and to be, part of what Coach Lea had, I saw what he did from a unit standpoint at Notre Dame and how special, that unit was. And to see what he did now on a team-wide scale was just really cool because I resonate with that. And I knew that's something that I wanted to be a part of.
Absolutely. And that's cool to kind of have that backseat view of what he had been building all the way back to Notre Dame and see it come to fruition. I know this past season was one that, many won't forget around the country to keep up with football, help improve a run defense from 104th nationally ranking to 52nd in 2024. Birmingham Bowl champs, a lot of in SEC. It's easy to count you guys out, and you showed up and beat some good teams this past year. It was fun to watch, man. It was fun to keep up with. Now, like I said, I do want to get you back to your little one. I want to ask you before I let you go here. You were part of our 2025 35 under 35 class, and what a special class, what a special program that has continued to be. Why was it important for you to apply, and why would you encourage others to do so?
Yeah. First of all, like, it's an honor, and to see the guys in the past that have been recognized for that and are part of the fraternity now is really, really cool. And to be able to now tap into that and hear their stories, that day, starting with the day itself, like, covers a wide range of education, which I thought was really cool because and everybody else knows how much coaching is beyond just, looking at the tape in your office, so it's a life and, it's a calling and but the way that you guys, wrapped in the financial piece, the recruiting piece, the the networking piece, the agent piece, all that stuff was really, really cool. And that stuff, again, like fuel for the future, rather than just, give a man a fish, teach a man to fish type of stuff. And I think that day was just, I have so many notes from that and so many things from that I'll carry forever. So that was awesome, the way that the day was structured. But then from a network standpoint, have already cultivated relationships with guys even a few months out, from our convention, that I know that I'll tap into for the future, for actual football knowledge, and talking about schemes, talking about, whether it's defensive play, linebacker play, any of that stuff, recruiting stuff. We've already started, tapping into that. And then hearing from other people too, that are part of the network and part of the fraternity, say, hey, congratulations. I was in it in 2021 or 2017 or, all that stuff. And hey, if you need anything, just let me know. People that I didn't know prior to that, which was really, really cool. Cause I think ultimately, like the networking is important, but we want to do the best we can coaching, because we want to be able to serve the players, and I think, anytime that you can do that and find a way to serve the coaches so that the coaches can then be better for the players, I think is awesome. So, so I would encourage, anybody to do that. I was at the tail end again, just like I was with my GA time at Notre Dame. I got in at the very end. You guys, fortunately let me in. So, it was, really, really an honor and really cool. And, and again, the best way to try and help the players who are the future leaders, of our world and our society, is to help those that can help the players. And that's, hopefully that's the coaching. So, so I appreciate being a part of that and being a part of something whose mission is deeper than just the X and O's.
Well, Coach, we appreciate you being a part of that, man, and thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. I know it's vacation, and man, that the vacation word is very slim pickings these days, and appreciate you sacrificing a little bit of time, and I hopeful to see you there in Charlotte in 26 if you're not planning making a way through through the bowls season and all that good stuff. So, anyways, man, I appreciate you. Thanks a ton, and look forward to seeing you. Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Mario. I appreciate it.
All right.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.